Okay, so we're going to need the elastic load balancing service next. And this is going to be responsible for distributing requests across multiple instances that are in more than one availability zone. We're actually going to have 2 availability zones set up. It's going to be, we're going to set up health checks so it can see when an instance is no longer healthy and stop sending it any new traffic. Another thing you could do with the ELB, which we're not going to do with this particular demo, is you could send HTTPS requests to it and actually install your SSL certificate on the ELB. And then you could terminate the SSL there and just do regular HTTP or TCP to the instances behind it. The ELBs are a really important part of the auto-scaling functions, but the ELB service itself automatically scales out. See, it's not a single device. It's actually a bunch of EC2 instances that we don't see. They're all managed by AWS. And when there's a lot of traffic coming into the ELB, it will automatically scale up and add more instances so that it doesn't become a bottleneck to our application. All right, and there are 2 types of ELBs, the ones that we've had for years, that is now called classic ELB, and then there is a layer 7 ELB known as an application ELB. Okay, so here's the differences between the 2. An application, let's start with the classic ELB is just simple routing, and basically by default it sends requests to instances that have the least number of outstanding requests. So it looks across all of your instances in your group, says which ones have the least number of requests that have not yet been responded to, and that's the one that gets the next request. You could use it for HTTP, HTTPS, TCP, or SSL. Okay, it does not support IPv6 addresses, only IPv4, and it doesn't have the web application firewall, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Now, the application ELB, on the other hand, is a little bit more powerful than the classic ELB because this supports content, host, or path-based routing. In other words, the Elastic Load Balancer looks at the request and can send the request to a different target group of instances depending upon the URL, the path, the cookies, things like that. And so, for example, you could have images.wadetraining.com, and that could go to a file server that has my images on it. And then I could have www point to a load balance, another load balancer, or something else, okay, or web server instances or something like that. So, so the application ELB is aware of the nature of the request and sends to different target group. It supports HTTP, HTTPS, and the new HTTP version 2 and WebSockets. Okay. It does allow you to use IPv6 addresses, and it does support the AWS service known as WAF, which stands for Web Application Firewall. This means you could do application filtering on the ELB. So, for example, you could filter out SQL injection attacks, cross-site scripting attacks, and things like that. Again, this is not available on the classic ELB, but is available on the application ELB. Okay, now to make our infrastructure nice and safe, we're going to put security groups around everything, right? Now this is a particular sample architecture. It's very common when you have an ELB, you want to put a security group around that. And that security group is going to allow traffic from the internet, okay? But the instances down below it in the web server security group doesn't need traffic from the internet because it's only going to get it from the ELB security group. So what we can do is we can define a security group for these guys, and we create a rule that says we're going to accept TCP port 8080 from anything in the ELB security group, and that's the only thing we're going to allow. That means no internet traffic directly is going to be allowed into these web server instances. That also means this doesn't have to be a public subnet. This could be a private subnet because we're only going to be communicating with the ELB. So the ELB is going to be public facing. It's going to have public IP addresses, but nothing else below would need to. Okay. Now in this particular example, I've also thrown in a database just to show you. You could have another you could have a database, a relational database or something like that down here, and you could put it in its own security group, and even in its own subnet if you choose, right? And that database security group could be locked down by saying, I'm only accepting traffic from the web server security group and my particular port number, which is what the database is running on, 3306 or something like that. And that would be the rule I put in that security group. So now this is completely locked down because this will accept HTTP from the internet, but this will not. This will only accept a TCP communication from the ELB security group on a particular port number, and this will only accept a communication from the web security group on our database port number, and that's it. Everything else is allowed, is denied by default. Those are the only things that are allowed. Very simple to set up. 3 security groups, 3 rules, and you're good to go. Okay,